Nellie Dax killed the Marshal with one shot, then pinned his badge to her chest and told her brother, "You're coming with me or I'm dragging your corpse." The dust devils danced across the parched land, mirroring the turmoil in Nellie Dax's heart. Life on the Double D Ranch wasn't easy, but it was home. Pa had passed years back, leaving Nellie to tend the meager herd with her younger brother, Caleb. Caleb, with his reckless grin and a knack for finding trouble, was her responsibility, her blood. Their loyalty ran deeper than the dry creek bed that snaked through their property. It was a bond forged in hardship, in shared sunsets and whispered promises under a sky full of stars. She'd always been his protector, his anchor in a world that seemed determined to pull him under. That fierce love would soon be tested beyond anything she could imagine. That test arrived with the dust and heat of midday in Redemption Gulch. Caleb, restless and bored, had ridden into town seeking a distraction. Nellie had warned him to stay out of the saloon, but Caleb never listened. Inside, fueled by cheap whiskey and bravado, he'd gotten into a card game with a surly miner named Jeb. Accusations of cheating flew faster than the cards. Fists followed, shattering a bottle of whiskey against the bar. The fight spilled out into the street, a chaotic swirl of bodies and curses. It was the kind of trouble Caleb always seemed to attract, a dark cloud that followed him wherever he went. The Marshal, a burly man named Thorne with a face like weathered leather, pushed through the crowd. He'd seen Caleb's type before, young, reckless, and spoiling for a fight. "Break it up," he bellowed, his voice cutting through the noise. Caleb, already riled up, spat on the ground. "Stay out of this, Thorne." The Marshal didn't hesitate. His hand moved in a blur, drawing his revolver. The glint of steel caught the sunlight. He aimed it squarely at Caleb's chest. "Last warning, boy," Thorne growled, his eyes cold and unforgiving. Nellie, who'd followed Caleb into town, watched in horror from the edge of the crowd. Time seemed to slow. Nellie saw the fear in Caleb's eyes, a flicker of recognition that he'd gone too far. She reacted without thinking. A small derringer hidden in her boot appeared in her hand. The crack of the gunshot was deafening. Thorne staggered, a crimson stain blooming on his chest. He crumpled to the dusty street, his gun clattering beside him. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that hung heavy in the air. Nellie stood frozen, the smoking derringer still clutched in her hand, the weight of what she'd done crashing down upon her. She had just killed the town marshal. A primal instinct screamed at her to run, to grab Caleb and disappear into the vastness of the desert. But then, a strange calm settled over her. She looked down at Thorne's lifeless body, then at the tarnished star pinned to his chest. An idea as audacious as it was insane took root in her mind. Bending down, ignoring the murmurs of the crowd, Nellie unpinned the badge. Its cold metal bit into her palm. She straightened, her gaze hardening. This wasn't running. This was something else entirely. This was justice, twisted and contorted though it might be. "We're leaving," Nellie said, her voice surprisingly steady. She grabbed Caleb, who was still in shock, by the arm. "Now." He stumbled, protesting, "Nellie, what are you doing? They'll hang us." Nellie ignored him. She knew what she was doing was crazy, but it was the only way she could see forward. She started dragging him towards their horses, ignoring the stunned faces around them. "I'm bringing him in," she announced to the crowd, pinning the Marshal's badge to her own shirt. "Dead or alive." The desert shimmered in the distance, an unforgiving landscape that mirrored the difficult journey ahead. The desert was a furnace. Each step was a struggle, the sand sucking at their boots. Caleb, grazed by a bullet in the scuffle with Thorn, groaned with every movement. "Nellie, I can't," he gasped, his face pale. "Leave me, save yourself." Nellie's grip tightened on his arm. "Don't be a fool," she snapped, though her own strength was flagging. She knew he was slowing her down, that every mile increased the risk of capture. But abandoning him wasn't an option. It never had been. The sun beat down mercilessly, the only sound the rasp of their breath and the creak of saddle leather. They were alone, swallowed by the vast, indifferent landscape. Nellie remembered the winter Pa died. Caleb, barely 10, had been sick with fever. The doctor said they needed medicine, expensive medicine they couldn't afford. Nellie, just 15, had traded her prized mare, a gift from Pa, for the cure. Caleb never knew. Or the time he'd gotten mixed up with some older boys stealing from a store. Nellie had taken the blame, spending a night in the town jail to protect him. These memories flickered in her mind, fueled by the burning sun. Each sacrifice, each act of protection had cemented their bond, making it unbreakable. Caleb was her responsibility, for better or worse. Back in Redemption Gulch, a posse was forming, fueled by outrage and a thirst for justice. Deputy Johnson, Thorne's second-in-command, led the charge. He was a stern man, unyielding in his belief in the law. "She killed a marshal," he roared, rallying the townsfolk. "We can't let her get away with this." A dozen men, armed and determined, saddled up and followed Johnson into the desert. The tracks were clear, easy to follow in the soft sand. The posse moved with grim purpose, a symbol of the relentless nature of frontier justice, a shadow chasing Nellie and Caleb across the unforgiving landscape. The relentless sun and dwindling water began to chip away at their resolve. Caleb, weak and feverish, became increasingly resentful. "This is your fault, Nellie," he accused, his voice hoarse. "If you hadn't interfered," Nellie, exhausted and dehydrated, snapped back, "if you hadn't been so reckless, none of this would have happened." The weight of their shared predicament, the Marshal's death, the relentless pursuit, pressed down on them, magnifying their flaws. The desert, in its stark beauty, offered no comfort, no forgiveness, only a brutal test of their enduring but fraying bond. Their path crossed with a grizzled prospector, old Silas, who offered them water in exchange for information. He seemed harmless, but Nellie sensed he knew more than he let on. Later, they encountered a family, their wagon broken down, their children gaunt with hunger. The mother pleaded for help, for any scrap of food Nellie could spare. These encounters presented Nellie with difficult choices. Did she risk helping others, potentially jeopardizing her own mission and Caleb's fate? Or did she harden her heart and focus solely on survival, sacrificing her own humanity in the process? Caleb's condition deteriorated rapidly. The bullet wound festered and fever racked his body. Nellie knew she needed to find shelter, medicine, something to ease his suffering. But every detour, every moment spent caring for him, increased the risk of the posse catching up. She considered leaving him in the care of the desperate family, but the thought was unbearable. Instead, she rationed their dwindling water, cleaned his wound with whatever she could find, and prayed for a miracle, knowing that each passing hour brought them closer to either salvation or capture. The weight of his life rested solely on her shoulders. The posse was gaining. Nellie could see the dust cloud on the horizon, a constant reminder of their impending doom. She pushed Caleb harder, ignoring his pained cries. She knew they were running out of time, that every delay brought the posse closer. Deputy Johnson was relentless, driven by a sense of duty and a desire for revenge. The tracks were clear, leading the posse directly to them. Nellie desperately searched for a way to throw them off, a canyon to cross, anything to buy them some time, but the desert offered no escape, only the certainty of capture. The tension was a palpable thing, a heavy weight pressing down on them. During a brief respite under the meager shade of a Joshua tree, Nellie stared at the Marshal's badge, its tarnished surface reflecting the harsh sunlight. Was this justice? She killed a man, a lawman, to save her brother, but had she truly done the right thing? Thorne had been doing his job, upholding the law. Maybe Caleb deserved to face the consequences of his actions. Doubts gnawed at her, whispering insidious questions in her ear. The badge, once a symbol of her twisted sense of justice, now felt like a heavy weight, a constant reminder of the life she had taken and the path she had chosen. The sky turned a sickly yellow as a sandstorm descended upon them. The wind howled, whipping sand into their faces, blinding and choking them. Caleb coughed violently, his fever spiking. Nellie struggled to keep him from being swept away, the wind tearing at her clothes, threatening to rip the badge from her chest. The storm erased their tracks, offering a temporary reprieve from the posse, but also isolating them further, stripping away any remaining sense of control. The desert, already an enemy, had become a raging beast, intent on swallowing them whole. As the sandstorm raged, Nellie stumbled upon a narrow crevice in the rocks, a potential escape route barely wide enough for one person. Caleb was too weak to move, let alone squeeze through. In that moment, the full weight of her situation crashed down on her. She could leave him, disappear into the storm, and possibly survive. No one would blame her. He was slowing her down, likely to die anyway. The thought was a temptation, a dark whisper promising freedom. But the image of his trusting face, the memory of all the sacrifices she had made, held her back. Her loyalty was about to face its ultimate test. Nellie turned away from the crevice. She knelt beside Caleb, pulling him closer. He was barely conscious, his skin burning. "I'm not leaving you," she whispered, her voice raw. "Never." A faint smile touched his lips. Knew you wouldn't, he murmured, his eyes fluttering open. In that moment, stripped bare by the storm, their connection was undeniable. He was her brother, her responsibility, and she would face whatever came next with him by her side. The decision brought a strange sense of peace, a reaffirmation of the bond that had defined her life. The sandstorm subsided as quickly as it began, leaving a landscape transformed, yet no less unforgiving. And the posse was there, silhouetted against the setting sun, blocking their path. There was no escape. Deputy Johnson and his men dismounted, their faces grim. "Nellie Dax," Johnson called out, his voice echoing across the barren landscape. "It's over. Put down your weapon and surrender." Nellie stood her ground, shielding Caleb with her body. A final showdown seemed inevitable, a bloody conclusion to their desperate flight. The desert held its breath, waiting. Instead of raising her gun, Nellie took a step forward, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Wait," she called out, her voice surprisingly strong. "Don't shoot, please, just listen." Johnson frowned, suspicion etched on his face. "There's nothing to talk about, Dax. You killed a lawman." Nellie met his gaze, her own filled with a desperate plea. "I know what I did was wrong," she said, "but Thorne was about to kill my brother. He didn't have to draw his gun. I acted to save him." She appealed to their sense of fairness, their shared humanity. "Just give me a chance to explain." Among the posse stood a man named Thomas, a shopkeeper who had known Thorne for years. He remembered Thorne as a fair man, but also a man quick to anger. He'd seen Thorne lose his temper before, witnessed his heavy-handed approach to justice. Nellie's words resonated with him, planting a seed of doubt in his mind. He glanced at Johnson, his face hard and unforgiving, then back at Nellie, her eyes pleading. He wasn't sure what to believe, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than Johnson was letting on. The conflict warred within him, tearing at his conscience. A tense silence descended, broken only by the whisper of the wind. Johnson remained unmoved, his hand hovering near his gun. "That's not how I saw it," he growled. Thorne was just doing his job, but Thomas stepped forward, his face troubled. "Maybe we should hear her out, Johnson," he said, his voice hesitant. "Maybe there's more to this than we know." The posse shifted uneasily, divided by doubt. The moral ambiguity of the situation hung heavy in the air. Was Nellie a cold-blooded killer or a desperate sister acting out of love? The answer wasn't so clear-cut anymore. Taking a deep breath, Nellie spoke, her voice resonating with raw emotion. "I know I broke the law," she admitted, her gaze sweeping across the faces of the posse. "But I did what I had to do. Caleb is my brother, my family. I couldn't let him die." She spoke of their hardscrabble life, of the sacrifices she had made, of the unwavering loyalty that bound them together. "Justice isn't always black and white," she pleaded. "Sometimes it's about choosing between two impossible choices. I chose my brother. Can you honestly say you wouldn't have done the same?" Johnson, his face etched with conflicting emotions, hesitated. He'd sworn an oath to uphold the law, but Nellie's words had touched something within him. He looked at Caleb, weak and feverish, then back at Nellie, her face etched with determination. He knew that frontier justice wasn't always simple, that sometimes the lines between right and wrong blurred. "All right," he said finally, his voice gruff. "I'll make a deal." His decision reflected the complexities of frontier law, the uneasy balance between justice and compassion. The compromise was harsh but fair. Caleb would face a reduced sentence, acknowledging his role in the saloon brawl and his defiance of the Marshal. Nellie, however, would be charged with manslaughter for Thorne's death. She would return to Redemption Gulch and face a judge, leaving her fate in the hands of the town she had wronged. It wasn't the freedom she had hoped for, but it was a chance for Caleb to survive, a chance for some semblance of justice to prevail. She accepted the terms, knowing that the price of loyalty was often steep. Nellie removed the Marshal's badge, its cold metal now familiar in her hand. She handed it back to Johnson, her gaze steady. "I understand," she said, her voice filled with a newfound resolve. "I'm ready to face the consequences." The desert journey had changed her, stripping away her naivete and replacing it with a hard-won understanding of the world. She was no longer just Caleb's protector. She was accountable for her own actions. A sense of responsibility settled over her, heavy but not unwelcome. It was the price of doing what she thought was right, even if it was the wrong way. The final scene shows Nellie and Caleb riding towards Redemption Gulch, accompanied by the posse. The setting sun casts long shadows across the desert, painting the landscape in hues of orange and purple. Their future is uncertain, their lives forever changed by the events of the past few days. Caleb, still weak, leans heavily on Nellie, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and gratitude. They face an uncertain future, but their bond, forged in the fires of loyalty and tested by the harsh realities of the desert, remains unbroken. Whatever lies ahead, they will face it together.